Welcome everybody to this game review of Attack of the Earthlings here on Additional Pylons Games. Before we get started, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Team Junkfish / Junkfish Limited for the free game key. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of stealth games. I'm a big fan of turn-based strategy games, so this is right up my alley. So again, I really appreciate it. For those of you who are new to the channel, this is a little bit just to give you a primer on how I do my game reviews. First of all, I'm going to describe the game, just pretty much what it is, maybe something that you don't get just from a brief glance at it. I'm going to give a general description of the gameplay, and then finally I'm going to outline what makes it fun, what makes it challenging, what makes it a really good game. From there, I'm going to finish with my rating, so my rating on a 1 to 5 scale, and finish up with my summary and my recommendations. So I try and recommend these games as I would recommend them to a friend, because that's how I consider you guys. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it here with the description of Attack of the Earthlings. So Attack of the Earthlings is an indie game, which always near and dear to my heart. Again, it's a turn-based strategy game, and it kind of flips the script, flips the story on XCOM, if you're familiar with the XCOM series. So instead of being the humans defending Earth, in Attack of the Earthlings, you play as the aliens, you play as the swarmers, as they're called, trying to fend off a greedy and frankly inept corporation from invading your homeland here in Attack of the Earthlings. Attack of the Earthlings is also, it's a dark comedy type of game. It has some decent comedy elements. I really enjoyed it, actually. I smiled, I laughed, I enjoyed myself while playing it in that way. It's goofy, but at the same time, it's dark. I mean, this is a game about aliens like killing and eating humans in order to propagate their species. So it's a little dark. With that, it's still fun. You're killing these corporate buffoons and making a good time of it. And there's some funny situations that you put into. So overall, that's a brief description of it. So the gameplay is very much what you would be familiar with if you have played any of the XCOM series, any sort of grid-based, turn-based strategy game. So grid-based movement, all units, standard, starting off, have a limit of 8 action points. So moving a tile costs an action point. There's different abilities that the different species of swarmers have. Those take up a certain number of action points. And then there are attacks. Attacks are not based on action points. They're based on attack points. So a little bit different there. With that, every mission you start off with the matriarch. The matriarch acts as 3 different things. First, she acts as your unit spawning base. So the matriarch basically will spawn any of your units. So she's very important in that way. 2, she's also a pretty decent all-around assault. So she's got high health, she's got some good abilities, she's got the ability to create drones, she's got the ability, again, to spawn other units. But third and most importantly, the matriarch acts as kind of like your king in chess. If you lose your matriarch, you lose the mission. So it's kind of this interesting balance of she's one of your strongest units, but also you can't let her die because then you lose the mission. At the same time, you need to keep her close to the action so that she can continue to spawn units as your units consume human flesh. I'm not sure I'll ever get comfortable saying that phrase, consuming human flesh. Anyways, throughout the game, enemies will roam the halls, they'll roam through rooms, and you have to kill them, consume their biomass in order to spawn more units and kind of snowball and power a little bit. As you go through the game, you're able to upgrade your grunts. So you start off by just spawning grunts. These are your base units. They act as all-purpose units. They're small, they're not very strong, they don't really have a lot of special abilities. The only thing they really have going for them is that they can climb through vents, which is actually really important from a gameplay perspective. But from there, you can actually evolve your grunts into 3 specializations. First specialization are your Goliaths. These are your standard tanks that can do get them to do a ground pound. They can absorb damage. They can heal damage. They can eventually get upgraded to attack twice a turn, which is kind of nice. But they're just your big beefy tanks, right? Secondly, you've got your Stalkers. As the name implies, they are your stealth killers, so they can go in the vents as well. Goliaths and the last upgrade, Disruptors, cannot go in vents. But Stalkers are your stealth killers, so they can lay down traps. They get extra damage when attacking from behind. They ignore armor when they attack as well, so your stealth killers, good for taking down tough enemies. And then finally, you have your disruptors. Your disruptors are kind of your ranged units slash tricksters slash disablers, so they can blind enemies. They can like ping an area and create a sound which will attract enemies to it, which is great for setting up an ambush. So they're just all around good for kind of your trickster gameplay. Those are the disruptors. So each of these upgrades, each of these different categories, Goliath, Stalkers, and Disruptors, you can get these abilities through mutagen, which is something that you collect throughout the game as you complete missions quickly, as you do side objectives, as you don't let your units die. You get more mutagen, and as you get more mutagen, you can then upgrade your matriarch, you can upgrade your Goliaths, etc., etc. Finally, you can also infest civilians. By doing this, you create drones, and drones are kind of they're basically scouts. They're stealthy scouts, if you will. You're able to get them past unalerted humans, and you can scout out the area a little bit and help to plan your tactics in your attack. So that's a description of the gameplay right there. On to challenges. So there are 5 major challenges that occur throughout Attack of the Earthlings. The first major challenge is that you start every level with basically just your matriarch, and it's you against sometimes 20, 30, even more enemies. And so the first challenge is that, again, it's a snowballing game. If you can get that first enemy killed, if you can consume the flesh, and you can make sure, I'm never gonna get used to that. It's so weird. If you can kill your first enemy, if you can get a couple grunts out, and you can start snowballing power, that's the main challenge. Is how do you get that first kill? How do you get that first attack? How do you get that, how do you just kind of get your foot in the door, really, is the first challenge. The second challenge is that every level, I think that Junkfish did a very good job at varying the level design. So each level has a different challenge that's kind of thrown into it. So some of them have lots of vents, and so you're able to move around the vents and use that. Some of them, one level where the matriarch is caged up, and so you can't really use your matriarch for anything. You have to use your grunts, you have to use your stalkers for that. There's another one where there's just overwhelming numbers of enemies coming to attack your matriarch, and that's kind of fun because you have to, it's kind of a it's kind of a Dota almost. So you've got enemies coming down each lane, and you have to defend. So a pretty good job of varying up the challenges that occur each level. Limited turns is another way that they do this as well. So that's the second challenge. Third challenge, it kind of has this understated rock, paper, scissors kind of attack style combat where, so there's certain swarmers that are good against certain types of human enemies. So Goliaths are good against one type of enemy, Disruptors are good against another, Stalkers are good against high armor enemies. So you kind of have to play this, this game of which guy do I upgrade my grunts into to counter the enemies that are coming at me that I'm going to be encountering. So you have to kind of plan ahead in that way, which is pretty fun. Fourth challenge is you have to determine how and when to use different tactics. So again, you've got different types of swarmers. How do I evolve them? What kind of enemies are going on? What's the point of this mission? But you have to determine what's the most effective strategy for going in. So is it going to be a hit and run attack? Are you going to kind of use tricky tactics or something like that? Or are you going to just swarm in head on? You're going to have some Goliaths that'll take the brunt of the damage, and then you'll come in with your other units behind, something like that. So that's the fourth challenge. And the final challenge is completing secondary bonuses and finishing quickly. The faster that you finish the level, the faster that you complete the mission, as well as if you complete secondary objectives, you get more mutagen. And again, mutagen is very important for getting those persistent upgrades, making your Goliaths tougher, making your Stalkers have more action points, making your Disruptors have more abilities so that you can use more tricky tactics, that sort of thing. So those are the 5 challenges. Again, snowballing in power, the level design that varies, having this rock, paper, scissors style of combat, figuring out when to use what type of tactics, and then making sure that you maximize your mutagen gain so that you set yourself up well for future levels. So that's a brief description of the game, of the challenges, that sort of thing. So, Attack of the Earthlings, how do I rate it on my scale? Well, first of all, I have to explain my scale. So my scale is basically, again, how would I recommend this to a friend? So a 3 on the scale is, it's a pretty good game. Like, if you buy it, you're not gonna be you're not gonna be disappointed, I don't think. As opposed to like a 4 or a 5, these are really, really good games. Like a 5 is like one of those games that every gamer should own just because it's that good, right? So it's a Minecraft, Portal, Skyrim, Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, like those really good games that you should play at least once. On the other side, you've got kind of like a 2, which is a game where It's got some serious bugs, maybe, or it's got some serious problems with it. Maybe it's got like really bad microtransactions or something where you can still have fun with the game, but it's not going to be perfect. Or a 1. A 1 is basically do not buy this game under any circumstance. Buggy, it's messed up, it's abandonware, something like that. So where do I rate Attack of the Earthlings? Unfortunately, I rate Attack of the Earthlings a 2.25. And I do that with, I really wanted to like this game. Like, it was fun, I really enjoyed it, but at the same time, I beat the entire game in less than 10 hours. And I can't justify a $25 price tag for a 9-hour experience. And not only a 9-hour experience, but a 9-hour experience with absolutely no replayability whatsoever. And that's the real kicker. If there was more replayability built into the game, I could recommend it, but I can't. I believe there's 8 or 9 levels in the game, and the first at least 3, maybe 4 are basically tutorials. And so once you've gotten to that point, there's 4 or 5 missions, and that's it. And I can't recommend a game that's so short, that has such little content to it, for a $25 price tag. And that's really the main concern. As far as like mission design and level design, what I think should have happened is this. Okay, let me go back. Let me step back. There are 3 main issues that I have. 1, the missions, the mission design. 2, there are some issues with gameplay. And 3, the story. So I'll address them in that order. So again, missions, there's just not enough missions. There's not enough content for me to justify a $25 price tag. What I think should have happened is I think that the story should have been broadened, and I think that the missions should have been triple, maybe even quadruple, but I think that the missions should have been much shorter, like half as long. Basically, what would happen is each mission would be an hour and a half, or longer, and that's way too long. And a lot of these missions just dragged on and on and on. So I think what should have happened is these missions should have been much more modular. They should have been much more concise, to the point, all that sort of thing. There's too much needed buildup for a lot of missions. So I think that they should have been tripled or quadrupled in number and made half as long. And that would have been made for a much more compelling game. Again, if you look at XCOM does this right. XCOM does this very well. There are some missions that are big, heavy missions, and they take long. That's fine. But most of the missions are done and over with in 15 minutes max. So that's the first thing. And again, every mission was basically the same thing. It was a snowball power curve. Hard at first and then super easy at the end of the mission. So that's the first issue that I have, is that the missions, there's just not enough of them, really. The second issue, gameplay. So if you go onto Steam, Steam describes Attack of the Earthlings as a tactical stealth game, which accurately describes the game. It is a tactical stealth game, but this also points out one of the problems. There's only one viable build for your swarmers, and that's the stalkers. Goliaths are almost absolutely worthless throughout the game, and disruptors. If I had a group of 8 swarmers, I would make 1 or 2 disruptors and the rest of them stalkers. That's it. I almost never use Goliaths. There was almost never a use for them. Disruptors or stalkers, well-placed stalkers, in vents or behind corners that were or using their traps, were always better, especially when a stalker pierces armor and does double damage when attacking from behind. There's never an instance where I can think of where I would prefer a Goliath over a stalker. So this goes back to replayability again. Not only are the missions short, not only are the missions like inflexible in their design, but there's only one really viable build when it comes to your swarmers. And finally, as far as the gameplay, the UI needs a little help, actually. So for starters, it would have been really nice to have a list of all my units. It was really annoying when I had 10 or 12 swarmers to have to click through and remember each and every one. There were multiple times when I would forget about a swarmer that was over on another part of the map, and he would just sit there doing nothing for a couple turns because I forgot about him. So there needs to be a list of units with their remaining actions, their remaining attacks, all that sort of stuff. And there also should have been a turn count. So for a game where you get more mutagen based on how quickly you finish each mission, I really should have known how many turns I've taken on that mission. That would have been very important. So the UI needs some updating, but again, part of the issue is just the inherent gameplay, where there's only one really good type of build. And finally, the story. So I kind of alluded to this, but it's got XCOM-like mechanics as a game, but as a game, it lacks a compelling story. There are some funny characters. There's a pretty decent villains that are in it. I enjoyed it, but just because it's a comedy game and just because it's lighthearted doesn't mean that the story needs to be flimsy or lackluster. I really just couldn't connect with it. Just I think that the story was too small in some ways. So there should have been more context for it. I don't know. I didn't get into the story much. Which is unfortunate. Again, I really wanted to like this game, but in the end, it comes out to a 2.25. Which on my recommendations, I would basically say, if you're a big fan of turn-based strategy games, and you're a fan of XCOM, and this game is on sale, then sure. But like, if you're not a fan of, if you don't meet those criteria, if you're not a fan of XCOM, if you're not a fan of turn-based strategy games, and if it's not on sale, I would say don't bother with it. Which is, again, it's really unfortunate because I had a lot of fun, but there's no hard mode. There's no like bonus missions or anything like that. There's no multiplayer. There's absolutely zero replayability. You're gonna play through this game one time, and admittedly, I played this game really slow. So you'll probably beat this game in 7 hours for $25. And you can't play it any differently because there are certain missions where you have to use certain swarmers. There are certain strategies that just aren't very good. And so again, there's absolutely no replayability. I just can't justify recommending this to a friend when there's not enough content for it. So I don't mean this to be a downer, but I think it's a really good base, and I think it's a really good place to start from. And I think that if Junkfish learns from this and makes Attack of the Earthlings 2, I would gladly play it. If there were 3 to 4 times as many missions, the missions were shorter, more pointed, were a little bit more fast paced, and if other strategies were viable, I would go for that. I had fun playing this game, but there just wasn't enough there for me to justify $25. So that is my review of Attack of the Earthlings. Again, I don't want to be a downer, but I had a lot of fun, but I just can't justify recommending it to my friends for that. The price to value it just isn't off. It's just off. It's not there. So anyways, let me know if you have any different thoughts, or if you can confirm what I came up with here with my game review here on Attack of the Earthlings. If you have any questions or anything like that, please again leave them down below. And if you enjoyed yourself, hit like and subscribe, and check out some of the other videos here on the channel. And we'll see you again soon here on AP Games.